hail, good health, and also good day. Good day to you all. I am Tyr Thorkelson. I'm your host here at Northworthy, Sagas and Stories. Please feel free to leave a comment. Don't forget to smash the like button and follow us on Twitter. Now then, as we know, there are 9 worlds of gods, goddesses, and other supernatural beings, such as giants and dwarves, quite apart from the Middle Earth, where mortal men and women live. Also, however, there is the realm of the elves, often called the beings, back in the ancient ancestral home of the Angles across the North Sea. And they're elusive creatures, the elves, and there are many tales told about them, often those that should offer caution, particularly to those who are unwary enough and ill-advised enough to consort with elves. And this is a story of someone who became involved with the elves, who live in Alfheim, the third world, elf home, a world only a step away from this one, if one knows the right place to look to find an entrance. And the story concerns a woman, and her profession was as a midwife. She went around all the homes in her district in Denmark, and she helped all those mothers who were in labour, especially with difficult births, and good ones as well. And she was an excellent midwife, reputed as probably the finest in all the Danish realm. And one day, there came a knock upon her door. She opened it and saw a young boy standing there. He said, "Quickly, Mum, your services are required. At the house, at the other end of the lake, up there, you'll find my mistress. She's only hours now away from giving birth to a boy or a girl, but she bid me to summon you to her. That's what I've come to do." And with that, the boy vanished as though he'd never been. And at once the midwife knew he was no ordinary lad. He was one of the elf folk, one of the beings, one of the race of elves. And she thought long and hard about the request that had been made, because, as I've said to begin with, people who have dealings with elves may find them, well, they're in favour one moment, being showered with fabulous gifts, but the next, the elves can turn against them, and their fortune may become ill. However, upon reflection, she decided that the worst thing would be to ignore the request, and so she put on her boots, she set off, up along the lake. But there was only one house there, and at one time, well, it was a splendid longhouse. Now, however, it had fallen down, it was derelict. No one had lived there for many years. It was a ruin. She couldn't imagine how anybody could live there. Nevertheless, time was getting on, and the sun was about to set, there where the water met the land, and day was merging into night. And she knocked upon the rotting, fragile door, which opened. A voice told her to enter, and she did so. But when she stepped inside, she found herself in a splendid hall. It was full of servants and important people, splendidly dressed, wearing gold and silver. There were rich carvings upon the woodwork, wonderful paintings, wall hangings and tapestries. Any king would have been satisfied to live there. And all the folk who lived in that place were uncannily beautiful. All of them, well, were worth more than a second glance. Some of them smiled at her, but some of them glared, and others passed by as though she were not even there. However, the boy who had first come to her, he led her to his mistress. The elf woman, who was in her bed at the back of the hall. And the midwife, well, she set to her work. And it was a long job. In fact, as she was working, she almost failed to notice that through the window, with the wooden shutter, just on the other wall, daylight was pouring in outside, although it had just turned to night in the mortal world she just left. But then again, it's well known time passes differently in the otherworldly realm. And the hours went by, and she had to exercise all her skill and knowledge to deliver the elf baby safely. And so naturally, she became both hungry and thirsty. But she had the presence of mind not to accept any food or drink that was offered to her. For that could be her downfall. She might never be able to return to the Middle Earth again. And when she'd finished, when the baby was delivered, then the elf woman told her to take a jar of salve and rub it upon the baby's eyes. And this she did. And she was weary at this point. She rose and accepted the heartfelt thanks of the elf folk, refused any gifts or payments, and went on her way. Stepped back out through the door, out into the night. And she looked back at that farmhouse and saw that it was a tumble-down ruin once more. She shook her head, and her eyes, they were bleary, they were aching and tired. And she hadn't had time to wash her hands. And she rubbed at her eyes. And as she did so, it was only then that she realised that some of the elf salve, the ointment that she'd rubbed on the baby, was still on her fingers. However, she went back along the lake and returned home. Had a good night's sleep. And in the morning, she'd been summoned to yet another lady of the district, and she was making her way up a path through some fields rippling with ripe golden wheat. And then she noticed among the waving sheaves that there were elves there, and they were picking the ears of grain off the corn and loading it into baskets and sacks. And she kept walking on, and she saw more and more of them. And gradually they stripped all the grain away from the field. And a man and a woman, they were walking along the path the other way. And she said good day to them and said, "Excuse me, but don't you see them over there? Do you see what they're doing to all that fine wheat?" They looked at her very strangely. They shook their heads and went on their way. It was obvious that they'd seen nothing. So she carried on. But everywhere she looked now, she saw those elves stealing all the grain that had taken the local farmers so long to grow. And eventually, because she was staring, finally the elves in the fields turned around and one of them said, "Look! Look over there!" And the whisper went around the field. "She can see us. She can see us." So much the worse for her. And with that, they crowded around her and they tore her eyes out. And that is the end of the story. For now, I remain your host, Dear. Don't forget to subscribe. Thank you.